On a dark and frigid night, the mountain stood as a desolate battlefield. The air was filled with the sounds of warriors screaming and charging forward, their forms reminiscent of a legion of ninjas rushing toward their target, the heavenly demon. Before him stretched an entire army, their sheer numbers a testament to their determination. The heavenly demon, undeterred, addressed them coldly, speaking of blood and fear. He questioned if this was truly the fate they desired. As the army drew nearer, he extended his hand with a menacing calm, declaring that he would grant their wish. In an instant, every head among the soldiers exploded in unison, their lives extinguished before they could so much as touch a strand of his hair. Blood filled the air, forming a crimson ring above him, and soon it began to rain down. The heavenly demon, unfazed, erected a barrier to shield himself from the blood, dismissing them as weak. Yet even as the first wave fell, more warriors remained ready to fight. He regarded them as fools, accumulating energy in his palm as if preparing for something far greater. A handful of martial masters charged forward, desperate to stop him, but their efforts proved futile. They were torn apart by Azora, an overwhelming force that left no doubt about the power of the soul-augmenting demonic art. The mountain began to quake, a deep rumble that struck fear into the hearts of all who stood against him. From the earth, a pair of massive purple hands emerged, shattering the ground as they ascended. These monstrous hands surged toward the army, striking with devastating force, ripping into the earth and destroying everything in their path. The realization of their hopeless task dawned on the surviving warriors, but it was too late. The hands crushed all beneath them, their victims' lifeless forms reduced to a grotesque heap. The corpses, now bathed in a glowing purple aura, began to move toward the heavenly demon. It was clear he was absorbing their life forces, growing ever more powerful. Blood continued to rain under the pale moonlight, pooling around the countless craters that scarred the battlefield. The heavenly demon smiled, his laughter breaking the eerie silence that had settled after the one-sided slaughter. He mused aloud, convinced that no one else was left to challenge him. The battlefield, once filled with cries of anguish, was now deathly silent. Despite his apparent triumph, the heavenly demon felt no satisfaction. He muttered about the emptiness of a life steeped in bloodshed. Suddenly, pain erupted in his head and chest. He clutched at himself, coughing up blood, and realized the recoil of the soul-augmenting demonic art was beginning. The power he had gained by consuming countless souls had come at a price. He had believed himself immune to its consequences, unlike the other heavenly demons who had fallen before him. Now he recognized his arrogance. As he reeled from the pain, two glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, multiplying rapidly. Purple chains shot from the void, binding him tightly. A portal resembling a star opened beneath him, and the chains pulled him toward it. He fought against the restraints, questioning who would dare try to control him. Summoning his strength, he shattered the chains, only to see an orb glowing with a familiar purple aura materialize above him. The aura enveloped everything, and the heavenly demon's body began to disintegrate. In his final moments, he realized the truth. The soul-augmenting demonic art was not merely a tool of destruction but one that purified the user's soul in the end. Accepting this, he resolved to live differently if given another chance. He yearned for peace, a life free from violence. The scene shifted to a tranquil town untouched by war. By a serene koi pond, a young boy stood in quiet contemplation. A woman named Soso called out to him, urging him to come inside for a meal before the cold set in. She was a servant of the Golden Wall merchants. The boy raised his hand and swung it forward absent-mindedly, startling her. This boy was Byeok Taesan, the second son of the Golden Wall merchants, though his recent behavior had frustrated Soso. She scolded him, insisting he return to his room immediately. Taesan, however, muttered bitterly, lamenting that he couldn't even harm her slender neck. He disparaged his body, calling it trash, and complained that he couldn't adjust to his unfamiliar face. In the reflection of the pond, the truth became evident. The heavenly demon now inhabited this frail body. Later, at a feast, Taesan struggled to hold his chopsticks, cursing the weakness of his new form. Soso tried to comfort him, telling him to remain optimistic. She mentioned an accomplished physician who would soon arrive to help him recover. Taesan dismissed her words, doubting any unknown doctor could do much for him. Soso urged him to think positively, but Taesan, resigned, remarked that it had been 10 days since he awoke in this feeble body. He acknowledged his new identity as the second son of the most powerful merchant group in Wuhan, though he clearly despised his current state. The scene transitions to the moment Taesan awakens, struggling to sit up as a throbbing headache overwhelms him. His surroundings are unfamiliar, and his disorientation grows as a crowd quickly gathers around him. Taesan begins to reflect on the state of his current body, lamenting its frailty. He notes how even basic tasks like dressing or feeding himself are nearly impossible. Despite his strikingly handsome face, the deeper issue lies in his broken meridians. They are entirely disconnected, leaving him vulnerable to death at any moment. He curses his misfortune, questioning how his second life could be burdened with such a weak vessel. His focus shifts to survival, formulating a plan to heal his meridians by temporarily connecting them using the soul-augmenting demonic art and gradually reinforcing them until they mend completely. However, the problem lies in acquiring the necessary souls. In his previous life he could have simply killed indiscriminately to obtain them, but he knows that path would lead to the same destructive consequences. Determined to avoid the recoil of the demonic art, he resolves to find another way. Sitting back, he watches as Soso sweeps the floor aimlessly. He contemplates the rare opportunity of a second chance and vows to use it wisely. Reflecting on the revelations from his previous life, Taesan believes he might unlock an entirely new level of power by using the soul-augmenting demonic art differently, a feat no other heavenly demon has achieved. Calling out to Soso, Taesan declares his intention to go out. She is surprised but agrees to take him wherever he wishes. When he announces he wants to visit a courtesan house, her initial reaction is composed, but she quickly becomes flustered. He questions her reaction, and she suggests that it would be more appropriate for Kyung Hwan, the bodyguard, to accompany him instead. Despite her discomfort, Taesan insists she come along, which only intensifies her embarrassment. Later, as Soso helps him into a robe, she remarks on his uncharacteristic behavior since waking up and questions his sudden desire to visit such an unusual place. Taesan shrugs off her concerns, asking about the bodyguard's whereabouts. Soso reassures him that Kyung Hwan, known for his discipline and unwavering dedication, will arrive promptly. As they talk, Soso expresses her hope that Taesan won't be so hard on himself and should hold out hope until the physician arrives. Taesan acknowledges her genuine care for him, something he hadn't noticed before, and finds her concern oddly comforting. Just then Taesan senses the approach of someone outside, though Soso sees no one. Moments later, the sound of a horse confirms his intuition, leaving Soso astonished. The rider soon appears, introducing himself as Chun Tsunwan, a Sword Dragon Corps commander, an elite group serving the Golden Wall merchants. Taesan observes Tsunwan's refined energy and remarks internally on his exceptional skill, noting that the Golden Wall merchants might be far more influential than they appear. Later, they ride through the bustling city, eventually arriving at their destination, the Fragrant Flower House, one of the top 3 courtesan establishments. As they dismount, Tsunwan informs Taesan he will wait outside in case trouble arises. Taesan questions this decision, asking whether Tsunwan truly believes he could reach him in time if danger strikes. Tsunwan doesn't reply, which prompts Taesan to mock his overconfidence and suggest that he accompany him inside instead. Tsunwan, however, remains resolute, refusing to join in such activities. Taesan questions Tsunwan, asking if his hesitation means he can't have fun or if it means he refuses to follow orders. As his sharp gaze settles on Tsunwan, the latter appears startled. Taesan then explains that it would be ideal for Tsunwan to both enjoy himself and protect him simultaneously. However, if that's not possible, Taesan insists that Tsunwan at least stay close. Tsunwan acknowledges the command with a firm "yes, sir." Taesan smiles faintly before opening the door, declaring it time to go inside. They are immediately greeted by a crowd of women who enthusiastically welcome Taesan. As one woman begins playing an instrument to set a lively mood, others join in, eating and chatting with him to keep him company. Amid the festivity, Taesan notices Tsunwan's absence and inquires about his whereabouts. One of the women informs him that Tsunwan is stationed by the stairs, blocking the path. Taesan remarks on Tsunwan's stubbornness and rigidity. One of the women offers Taesan a drink, but he declines, citing his unwell state and inability to consume liquor. When she asks what they should do instead, Taesan says he wants to hear rumors about himself. His request surprises the women, but he urges them to share everything they know about the second son of the Golden Wall merchants. Going around the table, they begin recounting what they've heard. As the night progresses, Taesan learns from the rumors that he supposedly possesses 1,000 golden yang, a modest manor, and a few courtesan houses as his inheritance. However, due to his frail health, he holds little power or influence, with most assets and authority going to his elder brother, Taesu. Taesan notes that these insights are things he could never have uncovered while confined to his home. Rising from his seat, he declares the conversation over and heads toward one of the doors. He comments that dealing with all the women at once would be challenging and selects just one to accompany him, glancing at her and stating she will suffice. Sitting on the bed, he is joined by the chosen woman, whose name is revealed to be Ryong. Taesan asks how long she has been with the courtesan house, and she responds that it has been about 10 years. He acknowledges this with a simple remark and suggests they begin. As the other women leave the room, they pass Tsunwan, gossiping about Taesan's frailty and joking that he might break under pressure. Despite their playful remarks, they agree on his striking handsomeness and express curiosity about experiencing his company. Tsunwan watches silently as the women exit, but his attention is abruptly drawn to loud, startling moans emanating from the room. The sounds catch the attention of everyone in the courtesan house, even reaching those near the entrance. An older man chuckles, finding the situation impressive, while some women speculate that the soundproof enchantment must have failed. Ryong's moans intensify, but it soon becomes evident that they are not expressions of pleasure but screams of pain. Taesan is revealed to be using his demonic arts to siphon her soul essence directly from her head. After some time, Ryong's cries cease and the door opens. Taesan steps out, visibly invigorated, and Tsunwan cautiously asks if he is all right. Smiling, Taesan assures him that he feels better than ever. Behind him, Ryong is sprawled on the bed, radiating an unfamiliar energy. The other women rush back to check on her, shouting her name and demanding to know what happened. Ryong, now rejuvenated and glowing as if transformed, tells them she feels as though she has been reborn. While the women speculate whether Taesan gave her an elixir, Ryong admits she doesn't remember what happened but insists her body feels remarkably light. The rumors about this event are bound to spread like wildfire. Back at the Golden Wall merchant's estate, Soso sweeps the empty courtyard while expressing concern about Taesan possibly fainting at the courtesan house. When the door suddenly opens, she turns to see Taesan entering. Rushing to him, she anxiously asks if he is okay. Taesan, nonchalant, suggests she ask Tsunwan about the details and strides past her, leaving Tsunwan awkwardly silent. Soso remarks that Taesan seems fine but isn't entirely sure. Inside Taesan's room, a faint purple aura surrounds him as he cultivates, reconnecting two branches of his meridians. He opens his eyes, noting that he managed to connect only a small meridian in his arm. Reflecting on his past failures, he concludes that absorbing unfiltered soul essence leads to destructive side effects. To avoid breaking his body again, he resolves to purify the chaotic thoughts within the souls he consumes, harnessing only the purified energy, which he recognizes as the most potent form of soul essence. He had tried his methods on courtesans who had endured countless hardships throughout their lives, which yielded remarkable results. However, the state of his body remained dire, far worse than he had initially imagined. It became evident that he would need to reside at the courtesan house for the foreseeable future. The scene quickly shifts back to the courtesan house, where the women are startled by his return. They exclaim their surprise, wondering how someone supposedly frail and weak could show up again. One of the women points out that he has, in fact, been present for 10 consecutive days. Adding to his appeal, they note his handsome looks, the status of his family, and the incredible transformation women experience after spending just one night with him. They become noticeably more beautiful. The rumors surrounding him had clearly spread far and wide, and the women began to see him as an extraordinary man, a true paragon among men. Meanwhile, the owner of the courtesan house, observing from above, appeared exasperated. She expressed disbelief at his return and sighed deeply. Through a sound transmission, someone asked if they should strengthen the noise isolation. She explained that all attempts so far had been futile, as his presence caused such a frenzy among the women that no amount of soundproofing could contain it. Dissatisfied customers only added to the problem. The individual transmitting the message remarked that he had become the greatest nuisance to the establishment. The owner, addressing this individual as Phantom Shadow, questioned whether they also found it peculiar that someone on the brink of death was now behaving with such vitality and audacity. She further wondered why he chose her courtesan house instead of the one owned by his own family. Phantom Shadow offered to investigate, but the owner dismissed the idea. She noted that his family remained the most influential merchants in Wuhan and warned against reckless probing, which could provoke significant trouble. Instead, she instructed Phantom Shadow to discreetly monitor him, as she needed to uncover his true intentions and what transpired within the private chambers. Meanwhile, Taesan scanned the room, observing the gathered women. Among them, he spotted Ryong, but his gaze remained intent as he mentioned taking up a new challenge. he instructed a man to bring out all the women, declaring he wanted to see every one of them. The man hesitated, pointing out that the most desirable women were already present, and doubted the others would interest him. Taesan, sensing something behind the man, dismissed his concerns. He confidently approached the source of the aura he felt, asserting that he alone would decide who caught his attention. The women were left bewildered, questioning why he was venturing toward such an unlikely candidate. He approached a particular woman and asked for her name. She introduced herself as Dan Young. Acknowledging her, he calmly stated that he would borrow her for the day. The other women gasped, astonished that he had chosen the least popular among them, remarking on his unusual preferences. As Dan Young followed him, Taesan encountered Kyung-gwin guarding the hallway. Internally, Taesan noted the oppressive energy surrounding Dan Young, attributing it to something deeply attached to her soul. He realized she was precisely the one he had been seeking. Despite the risk, now that his crucial small meridians were connected, he felt ready to confront this challenge and use her soul to fortify his core. Reaching the door to their room, he paused before entering, momentarily confusing Dan Young. Then suddenly he began to laugh, his tone sharp and scornful. He cursed at unseen adversaries, declaring their audacity. In a commanding voice, he called out to Kyung-gwin and requested his sword. Kyung-gwin handed it over, and Taesan infused it with his purple aura before slashing it upward. The blade pierced the ceiling and moments later, blood began to drip from above. Kyung-gwin stared in shock, realizing an assassin had been concealed there. Taesan, unfazed, stated matter-of-factly that he knew the assailant was still alive. Though he had made some progress, executing delicate movements still proved too challenging for Taesan's body. As blood dripped onto the floor, Dan Young appeared to be battling an intense case of PTSD. Observing her state, Taesan remarked that he could entrust the rest to Kyung-gwin, as he had more pressing matters with her. Kyung-gwin confirmed his readiness, and Taesan turned to Dan Young, declaring with a wild, almost maniacal gleam in his eyes that he would absorb her soul entirely that day, urging her to look forward to it. The scene shifted to the Yen Manor sometime later. A woman was sharing intriguing rumors with another, mentioning that the second young master now had a nickname. When asked what it was, Yuzioin, the Yen Manor's bodyguard, interjected, revealing the nickname, the Night King of the Fragrant Flower House and the man with unrivaled potency. The other woman slammed her book shut in a mixture of shock and excitement, demanding to be taken to the flower house immediately to meet him. This woman was none other than Harem, the sole heir of the Yen Manor and Taesan's fiancée. The narrative returned to Kyung-gwin, who was bowing before Taesan, stating that he had come to escort him back. As Kyung-gwin observed Taesan, he noticed an extraordinary energy radiating from him and asked what had been done with the assassin. Taesan, exuding calm confidence, confirmed that the assassin had been imprisoned. Praising Kyung-gwin's efforts, Taesan expressed his desire to rest and instructed him to lead the way back. Kyung-gwin could hardly believe the transformation in Taesan. The man before him seemed entirely different from the second young master he once knew. His energy had changed drastically, and his skills now allowed him to precisely strike down a concealed assassin. It was as if Taesan had become a completely new person. As they walked beneath blooming cherry blossoms, Taesan reflected on his progress. He mentioned that connecting one of his core meridians had significantly enhanced his body and senses. However, he still had 6 meridians left to connect, indicating a long road ahead. Nevertheless, he had overcome the stage of being considered trash. A small smile graced his face as he acknowledged the satisfaction of this modest accomplishment, marveling at how much he had changed. Taesan's musings were interrupted when he noticed Harem standing nearby, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity he couldn't ignore. He wondered who she was and why she looked at him in such a way. Harem called out, asking if he planned to visit the courtesan house again that day, causing poor Kyung-gwin to look visibly awkward. Taesan quickly deduced that Harem must have known the original owner of his body. Reflecting on her words, he concluded that the previous Taesan wasn't entirely foolish. Harem, drawing closer, confronted him about his recent behavior, accusing him of dissatisfaction with their engagement and suspecting he was acting out to push her away. Her words caught Taesan off guard, especially the mention of their engagement. As she approached, Harem grasped his arm, her eyes brimming with determination and longing. She declared that she would never give up on him and implored him not to give up on her either. Taesan, utterly perplexed, admitted to himself that he didn't even know who she was. Attempting to clarify, he denied trying to push her away, explaining that he had never given up on her. Harem, misinterpreting his words, began to smile, convinced he was finally acknowledging her feelings. Taisen realized she had a knack for selective hearing, which left him more frustrated than amused. Without another word, he brushed past her, announcing his departure. Flushed, Harem called after him, her voice tinged with a mix of embarrassment and hope. Taisen, inwardly shaken, muttered to himself that he couldn't believe a woman had managed to fluster the heavenly demon. Harem, in his eyes, was a truly formidable adversary. Taisen notices that Kyung-hwan is far ahead and wonders what he is doing. Kyung-hwan's face is flushed with a deep blush, betraying his emotions. Later in the day, Soso is seen pouring bathwater into Taisen's tub. She comments on hearing that he encountered Hareen on his way back home. Surprised, Taisen asks how she knows, to which she smugly replies that she has eyes and ears everywhere. With a knowing look, Taisen deduces that she must have been the one who tipped off Hareen about his whereabouts. Shifting topics, Soso inquires about Kyung-hwan's well-being. Taisen, puzzled, asks if Kyung-hwan is unwell. Soso clarifies that it isn't an illness, but rather Kyung-hwan's feelings for Seo-yun, asking if Taisen hadn't noticed. Taisen, even more confused, asks who Seo-yun is. Soso explains that Seo-yun is the bodyguard who is always with Hareen and that Kyung-hwan has been infatuated with her for quite some time. Taisen reflects that this must be why Kyung-hwan distanced himself earlier, smiling as he marvels at how different his life has become. Taisen muses on how his previous understanding of emotions was limited to fear and respect. Now, surrounded by such vibrant feelings, his world has transformed into something unimaginable. Strangely, rather than anger, he finds himself enjoying the novelty. Convinced that his soul has merged with Taisen's, he acknowledges that everything around him has become fascinating. That night, in the estate's prison, a torch flares to life. Kyung-hwan explains that he has temporarily blocked the assassin's pressure points but warns that the prisoner is exceptionally dangerous and utterly ruthless. Taisen laughs, finding this information favorable. With a commanding tone, he orders Kyung-hwan to open the cell. As the cell door creaks open, Taisen approaches the prisoner and observes him carefully. Noticing the overwhelming negative energy emanating from the assassin, Taisen remarks that assassins harbor the most dangerous thoughts but also possess potent soul energy. This makes them valuable for his purposes. Confident in his progress since connecting his first core meridian, he declares his intention to try something new and orders Kyung-hwan to remain outside. Kyung-hwan, visibly uneasy, warns that the prisoner is too dangerous and questions what Taisen intends to do alone. Taisen dismisses his concerns, pointing out that Kyung-hwan failed even to detect the assassin's presence earlier. Undeterred, Kyung-hwan insists that it is reckless for Taisen to face the assassin solo. Taisen, exuding an intense killing intent, calmly states that he dislikes repeating himself. Overwhelmed by the pressure radiating from Taisen, Kyung-hwan retreats with a cold sweat, acknowledging the command as he closes the cell door. Sitting outside, Kyung-hwan reflects on Taisen's overwhelming presence, likening it to standing before a peak martial master. Suddenly, muffled screams echo from inside the cell, growing louder with each passing moment. Alarmed, Kyung-hwan braces himself, questioning if his fears are being realized. The screams intensify, and he quickly concludes that they aren't Taisen's voice, leaving him anxious about the events unfolding inside. Within the cell, Taisen is seen extracting the assassin's soul, which radiates an unusual green tint mixed with purple. Taisen notes that the assassin is even more dangerous than he initially anticipated. The corrupted nature of the soul causes Taisen pain, forcing him to halt the process prematurely. Analyzing the situation, Taisen deduces that purifying a soul tainted by impure energy results in residual impurities assimilating. Although the purified energy is minimal, the corrupted energy complicates his progress. Deciding to avoid such situations for now, he resolves to frequent the courtesan houses instead. The scene transitions to the fragrant flower house, where the anxious madam nervously bites her nails. She snaps her fingers, summoning her assistant and demanding updates regarding Taisen and the captured phantom shadow. The assistant regretfully informs her that there is no news. Suddenly, another subordinate bursts into the room, urging the madam to follow him. Startled, she follows and is shocked to see the phantom shadow stumbling back into their domain. His movements are erratic, and his eyes roll to the back of his head as though under the influence of a powerful drug. The madam, horrified, questions his condition and orders the staff to strike his pressure points in an attempt to rouse him. The guard promptly strikes the back of the phantom shadow's neck as ordered, but what follows is grotesque. The figure begins to dissolve, much like a villain from a twisted tale, leaving behind nothing but bones on the floor. Both the guard and the madam recoil in shock and disgust at the horrifying sight. Fury overtakes the madam as she processes the scene, her anger boiling over. She demands to know if this grotesque act is truly the second young master's way of handling matters and asks where Danyang is at that moment. The guard hesitantly replies that Danyang is being prepared to be sent to the Crimson Dragon sect leader. Hearing this, the madam tightens her grip on her fan, her resolve evident as she declares that Danyang will be sent to Taizan instead. The guard attempts to reason with her, warning that such an act would surely provoke the wrath of the Crimson Dragon, potentially leading to the destruction of everything they have built if he finds out. However, the madam, blinded by her rage, disregards the warning entirely. She orders the cancellation of her visit, announcing that the fragrant flower house will send a present to the second young master instead. The perspective shifts to Danyang, who recounts how peculiar rumors about Taizan began to spread over time. Whispers circulated that spending a single night with him could transform someone, leaving them more beautiful and reborn, and binding them to him in an inexplicable way. Some referred to him as a deity who had undergone age regression, while others labeled him a demon-wielding sorcery. These rumors spread like wildfire, dismissed initially as idle chatter among bored courtesans, but Danyang's perspective began to shift. She confesses her uncertainty about whether Taizan is genuinely extraordinary or simply a figure of myth, though she now believes he might truly be divine. Her desire to serve him stems from this belief, and she admits she's drawn to him in a way she can't fully understand. The madam, overhearing Danyang's thoughts, laughs mockingly. She questions whether Danyang truly wishes to serve Taizan and accuses her of falling for him. When Danyang doesn't respond, the madam presses further, asking if Taizan offered to pay off her debt. Danyang denies this, stating that he said nothing to her. The madam dismisses her, warning that she remains a possession of the fragrant flower house until her debt is paid and instructing her to obediently prepare for her visit to the Crimson Dragon sect leader. However, the plan is unexpectedly altered, and Danyang finds herself outside the Golden Wall merchant estate instead. Reflecting on her situation, she marvels at the turn of events, wondering if fate might truly be on her side. Nervously, she contemplates whether Taizan will accept her, fearing that he might view her as too impure. Despite her apprehensions, her desire to meet him again pushes her forward. Meanwhile, inside his quarters, Taizan is deep in cultivation, glowing veins visible along his neck as he channels his energy. His focus is interrupted by a knock at the door. Pausing, he glances toward the source of the sound, curious. Soso's voice comes from the other side, announcing that Taizan has a visitor. He instructs her to let the visitor in, wondering who it might be. As Danyang steps into the room, Taizan is momentarily surprised to see her. She greets him with a mix of respect and urgency, expressing her gratitude and desire to serve him. Apologizing for her abrupt visit, she explains that the life he has given her has inspired her to live for him, and she hopes he will allow her to remain by his side. Taizan observes her closely, noting that her appearance has changed drastically since the last time they met. He attributes this transformation to the purification of her impure thoughts, finding the phenomenon intriguing. Turning to Soso, he asks where Danyang currently sleeps. Soso answers that she resides in the servants' pavilion. Taizan orders Soso to find a different location for Danyang, insisting that she should stay somewhere close to him. Surprised, Soso asks if this means Danyang will now work as a servant. Taizan questions what else Danyang could possibly do on the estate. Before Soso can respond, he declares that he is heading out and leaves her to take care of Danyang's arrangements. Soso stands there in confusion, marveling at how beautiful Danyang is and wondering why Taizan has been acting so oddly. She even wonders if Taizan's lifespan is running out, as his behavior seems increasingly strange. The scene then shifts to the Fallen Flower House, a different courtesan establishment. Taizan appears excited, commenting on how much he already likes the name of the place. He anticipates that there's a substantial amount of corrupt soul energy within, making him even more eager to enter. He tells Kyung Hwan that he is about to head in, but just as he does, a burly man steps into the frame, calling out to Taizan. Kyung Hwan immediately becomes alert, recognizing the man, who introduces himself as Wei Jekshin, the leader of the Crimson Dragon sect. Jekshin comments that he's been wondering who took Danyang from him and whether it was really just a young brat. As Jekshin's presence is noticed by nearby civilians, they immediately flee, whispering that they'll be killed if they provoke him. Taizan halts in his tracks, raising an eyebrow, and asks Kyung Hwan what's going on with this muscular man. Kyung Hwan explains that Jekshin is the leader of an unorthodox group that established itself in the area. Taizan's annoyance grows, labeling them as nothing more than bandits, leeches who dare to take such a grand name. He tells Kyung-hwan to ignore them. Jekshin, caught off guard by Taizen's indifference, scoffs, asking if he's truly being ignored and remarking that Taizen looks like a gigolo. This remark sends Taizen into a fit of rage. He glares at Jekshin, asking who in the hell is calling him a gigolo. He expresses his irritation, saying that he already dislikes how pretty his face is, and this comment only aggravates him further. Wondering why this brute of a man who looks like a human orc would say such a thing, Taizen's patience wears thin. Jekshin bursts out laughing, claiming that Taizen looks terrified and must be nothing but a helpless coward. In response, Taizen tells Kyung-hwan to deal with the others, but leave Jekshin to him. Kyung-hwan, ever loyal, begins to draw his blade, saying that this means he'll have to handle 2 opponents. Jekshin's men get ready, eager to see just how skilled Kyung-hwan really is. Jekshin, still laughing, comments that he can't believe Taizen would hire a bodyguard just to look more imposing. However, Jekshin says he'll overlook the situation if Taizen hands Danyang over to him. Taizen flatly rejects the offer, expressing his irritation at how much Jekshin talks and questioning if he plans to fight with only his mouth. At this point, Jekshin's temper flares and he charges at Taizen, throwing a punch aimed straight at his face. Kyung-hwan, noticing the attack, shouts for Taizen to dodge, but Taizen remains calm, slowly raising his hand. With a swift upward motion, he delivers a devastating upper palm strike to Jekshin, immediately feeling a sharp pain in his wrist. He mutters to himself that he had to hold back to avoid pushing his body too hard, but his body, as he suspected, is in poor condition. The scene shifts and we hear a thud as Jekshin collapses to the ground. Kyung-hwan checks to see if Taizen is okay, but Taizen simply asks if Kyung-hwan has already dealt with the others. Kyung-hwan is surprised, stating that he hasn't killed them yet. Taizen chuckles, calling him weak, and insists that Kyung-hwan needs to finish off the rest of the men before following him. Kyung-hwan, sweating nervously, acknowledges the order. Taizen starts to walk away, pausing momentarily to tell Kyung-hwan that if anyone asks, he's the one who killed Jekshin. He can't stand getting involved in troublesome matters. Kyung-hwan, standing before Jekshin's fallen form, hesitates for a moment before muttering a nervous, "Yes, sir." As he looks down at the fallen man, it becomes apparent that Jekshin is truly dead. Kyung-hwan is left pondering the situation, reflecting on how Taizen must have deliberately caught the assassin, his mind swirling with questions about who Taizen truly is and how much he's changed since their previous encounter. The following morning, the sun begins to rise, and we find Taizen in bed with a woman beside him. He comments on how his body feels sore, wondering if he expended half of his energy during the fight the day before. Back when he was the heavenly demon, he never would have had to worry about such things, but now in his current body, even the smallest exertion leads to breakdowns. He chastises himself for being too rash. Despite his physical limitations, however, he cannot accept being called a gigolo. Later, he returns home, noticing Harin's bodyguard. He sees Danyang pouring a drink for Harin and asks her why she's here. Seoyin, noticing Taizen's arrival, asks him if he brought that servant from the courtesan house. Taizen responds that technically Danyang came here on her own, but he can't be bothered to explain further. He then questions what it would mean if that were the case. Seoyin looks up at him, observing that his robe is loose, and asks if he just returned from the courtesan house. Taizen confirms this and Seoyin lets out a long drawn-out sigh. He then asks her what her problem is. Seoyin informs him that this situation is about his engagement with Harin and that it is definitely about to be broken off. After some off-screen conversation, Taizen sums it up. Someone had sent a marriage proposal to his fiancée, and because it came from the Zhongli clan and the Muram alliance, the young manor master who was caught off guard, decided to break off the engagement due to their actions. Seoyin mentions that the decision hasn't been finalized yet because Harin is completely opposed to it. It's clear she has more to say, and Taizen guesses it's hard for her to continue opposing in the current situation. He doubts she's here just to convey this news, asking if the manor sent her because they fear the Zhongli clan might harm him. She confirms, adding that Harin specifically asked her to protect him. When she begins to talk about the Zhongli clan, Taizen interrupts, calling them nasty bastards. Seoyin warns him not to speak so openly, and he smiles, pointing out that they abandoned the other clans and fled during the war against the heavenly demon. He finds it hard to believe they are still living so wickedly. He then pushes his chair back, stating that since she's here to protect him, he finds that very interesting and wants to see what she can do. The scene transitions to that night where they are walking through the forest. Taizen mentions that he has finally discovered someone worth challenging, and he can now connect the second meridian. Seoyin glares at the back of his head, Kyung-hwan sneaks glances at her, and Taisen is visibly annoyed. He tells Seoyin that she doesn't have to follow him if she doesn't want to, but she responds that this is the least she can do. He tells her to do as she pleases. Taisen suddenly stops walking, and Kyung-hwan asks what's going on, with Seoyin also confused. Taisen asks how many are there and Kyung-hwan wonders what he means. Then Kyung-hwan senses something and turns around, noticing 3 men in the trees behind them. He informs Taisen of the number of attackers, but Taisen corrects him, saying there are actually 4, meaning the one Kyung-hwan missed must be quite skilled. The 3 men drop down in front of them, and one of them comments that an ambush won't work anymore. Kyung-hwan prepares himself and the final man, the one in the back, makes his appearance, stating that the 3 of them need to come with him immediately. Taisen wonders why the unorthodox scumbags are being so respectful and asks Kyung-hwan to guess how skilled the man is. Kyung-hwan agrees and begins assessing him, noticing the energy the man is emitting and the faint scent of blood, indicating he is not ordinary. Kyung-hwan estimates that the man is at least 3 levels above him. Taisen smiles, telling Kyung-hwan not to waste time standing around and to verify his guess. As Kyung-hwan steps forward, the 3 men freeze, sensing something is wrong because they can no longer control their movements. He walks between them effortlessly, avoiding any need for a fight. The man in the back laughs, mocking Kyung-hwan for trying to fight alone, claiming that while his energy is impressive, he should stop acting tough and follow them quietly. Kyung-hwan narrowly dodges the attack as it grazes his hair, then looks back at the man who is raising his weapon for another strike. Kyung-hwan locks in, grabbing his blade and unsheathing it to block the attack. The force of the block sends the man stumbling back slightly. Kyung-hwan then takes the offensive, pushing forward, and the two engage in a series of 4 exchanges of blows. The man admits he underestimated Kyung-hwan, initially thinking he was just a merchant's bodyguard. He tightens his grip on his blade, leaps into the air and prepares for a finishing attack. Seoyin urges Taisen to help, but he dismisses her concern, saying it's not a big deal and that it will end with the man's final strike. Seoyin looks back and watches as a bright slash cuts through the air, severing the man's arm, and he screams in pain. It turns out Kyung-hwan was the one who won the fight. Seo-hyun comments that it's crazy, especially considering it only took Kyung-hwan 5 clashes to defeat someone that skilled. Taisen, however, is just annoyed that Kyung-hwan only severed the guy's arm and didn't kill him. Seo-hyun acknowledges that while Kyung-hwan is strong, he wasn't at this level until recently, and she wonders if Taisen might have given him some kind of elixir. Taisen tells her to stop standing around and deal with the rest as he has questions for them, and orders her not to kill them but to just block their pressure points and subdue them. She responds with a quick yes sir before unsheathing her blade and dashing forward. She immediately throws 2 attacks, one hitting a man in the back of the neck and the other under his armpit, paralyzing both. She scans her surroundings, wondering where the last assassin is. Kyung-hwan suddenly yells at Taisen to get away. Seo-hyun realizes the last assassin got past her and turns in fear, helplessly watching as the man attempts to stab Taisen directly in the throat. However, Kyung-hwan steps in, grabbing the man's head and slamming it into the dirt. Taisen wonders what Kyung-hwan is doing and looks back toward him, noting that it means Kyung-hwan chose to save him instead of pursuing the assassin. Taisen comments that Kyung-hwan is still too soft. Kyung-hwan apologizes for losing track of the assassin, but Taisen points out that if he were the heavenly demon, this would have been an unforgivable mistake and he would have killed him on the spot. However, Taisen starts to smile, saying that for some reason he's not actually upset and sighs, telling Kyung-hwan to forget it. He tells him to just gather the other 3 assassins in one place. Once the assassins are gathered, Taisen asks what should be done with them as they lie there motionless. Taisen suggests that killing them would be the best option, prompting one of the assassins to beg for his life, offering to answer all of Taisen's questions. Taisen watches them carefully, wondering why the man is so quick to offer information, and decides that since no one else is speaking, he'll just kill them all. But the man, desperate, begins to talk, claiming he is ready to snitch. He reveals they are from the Crimson Dragon sect and that they are here on orders from the Vice-Sec leader. He explains that earlier that morning, they beat up someone who refused to pay protection fees and trashed his inn for not wanting to serve them. The man continues spilling details, much to the dismay of his 2 companions, who are visibly frustrated by his eagerness to talk. He finally stops and Taisen tells him that's enough. The man slowly opens his eyes, seeing Taisen walking away from him, realizing that they've survived. Taisen then tells Seoyin and Kyung-hwan that they need to bring the assassins back alive as long as they keep talking. Seoyin, sensing something, asks if he's crazy to go to a courtesan house after all of this. At the Fallen Flower House, the sounds of a woman moaning can be heard, which are more like screams as Seoyin and Kyung-hwan sit in uncomfortable silence in front of the door. Kyung-hwan quickly turns his head away when Seoyin looks at him, and she asks him if everything is okay, suggesting that surely he needs to go in. He reassures her that it's fine, and they just need to wait until morning. Seoyin wonders what's up with his reaction, asking if he's always been like this. The moaning continues as the scene shifts to the three assassins lying in the room, staring at the ceiling. Later, the sun shines through a window, signaling morning as Taesan exits. He's surprised to see everyone waiting for him and wonders why all the assassins are still alive, as he had only ordered them to be kept alive if they were talking. He jokingly muses that it would have been funnier if they were in the room. Seoyin, thinking he's a beast, observes the three assassins who now regard him as a hero. Kyung-hwan tells Taesan that they've actually been talking a lot. Taesan asks for a recap, and Kyung-hwan explains that their orders were to bring him to the Crimson Dragon sect. As for the identity of the assassin who escaped, only the leader of the Crimson Dragon sect knows. Taesan thinks about it, recalling that the man was definitely not an ordinary martial artist and that it would have been hard for a regular bodyguard to handle him. However, he acknowledges that Kyung-hwan being stronger than expected was an unexpected variable for the assassins. It would be too obvious for the Zhongli clan to be behind this, so Taesan decides that they will head back to the estate first and bring the three captives along with them. Kyung-hwan responds with a yes, sir. At the estate, Taesan approaches a door, placing his hands on it before opening it. He declares that he will cast a restriction on the three prisoners first. He tells Seoyin and Kyung-hwan to pay close attention because he is going to teach them some useful martial arts starting today. Both of them are surprised that Taesan will be teaching them martial arts, but Taesan assures them that this will be a simple restriction technique, and he begins by explaining how to perform it. As Taesan explains, we see the three prisoners reacting differently to what's happening. Taesan emphasizes that control over inner energy is key in this technique and instructs them to practice it well. Seoyin and Kyung-hwan are both surprised and admit they've never seen this restriction technique before, but they immediately understand it. Taesan places his hand on the back of one prisoner's neck and tells him that he's going to perform the technique lightly. He warns the man that if he disobeys his orders, he will lose his sight. The man tries to plead, saying that even without using any restriction techniques, he wouldn't do anything foolish, but it's too late. The technique takes effect and the man screams in fear for his life. The room then goes silent as the man is left trembling on the floor. Taesan tells Seoyin and Kyung-hwan to try different restrictions on the other two prisoners. Seoyin wonders how Taesan knows all of this and why Kyung-hwan is just following his orders so obediently. She thinks Kyung-hwan looks evil. Taesan then suggests they create a restriction where the prisoner's testicles would explode if he goes against him. The prisoners immediately scream, rejecting the idea, and their eyes start watering. The scene shifts to the Joseo Pavilion, where a man sits at a table looking over a note. His name is Baek Woo-aeng and he is Taesan's uncle. The note mentions that the Fragrant Flower House still hasn't acknowledged anything. Woo-aeng talks to his son Baek Sang-il, who is the future pavilion master. Woo-aeng tells his son that if they continue to pressure the Fragrant Flower House, it will surely open up an opportunity. Woo-aeng closes the note and says that, regardless of whether or not they acknowledge the situation, they just need to make the best use of this incident to gain as much as possible for the Golden Wall merchants. The Fragrant Flower House is an intelligence organization disguised as a courtesan house, and they need to take this opportunity to bring them under the Golden Wall merchants' influence. Sang-il agrees to keep this in mind, and Woo-aeng asks if there is any other news. Sang-il tells him that after the death of the Crimson Dragon sect leader, a power struggle has erupted within the sect, and it looks like the sect will soon split into two factions, with some external influences involved. Sang-il asks his father if he thinks these external influences could be from the Golden Heavenly Alliance, without directly naming them. Woo-aeng doesn't hesitate to answer, saying that it's most likely the Golden Heavenly Alliance, and that Sang-il needs to stay alert. The Golden Heavenly Alliance is composed of several merchants in Wuhan. On the surface, they claim to have come together for mutual coexistence, but in reality they are opposing the Golden Wall merchants. Woo-aeng wonders what they are scheming, and Sang-il says that if they detect any suspicious activities, they will go after them immediately. There is an awkward silence between them for a moment. After clearing his throat, Woo-aeng brings up a recent rumor, saying that people are calling Taesan the Night King now. He asks Sang-il if he's heard of any medicine or food that Taesan has been using to improve his health. Sang-il responds that he hasn't heard anything specific, but he mentions that Taisen has remarkable stamina at the cost of his health. No one knows how long he can last, as he is constantly exerting so much energy, which is definitely going to shorten his life. Wu Wang acknowledges that he knows and then stops walking, saying that even so he feels so envious of Taisen. Later in the day, Soso is heard asking what is going on, as we see that the 3 prisoners have, in fact, survived. Taisen explains that she mentioned earlier that she needed some labor, so he brought them back. Soso remarks that even if that's the case, they look a little strange. Taisen responds that if she doesn't want to use them, she doesn't have to. She expresses disbelief that Taisen actually remembered something she said randomly one day and comments that the 3 men look very off-putting, even going so far as to say they remind her of troll dolls. She then adds that she feels like Taisen has become oddly kind. Taisen raises his hand and begins naming the 3 prisoners, starting from the left, calling them Black 1, Black 2 and Black 3. He announces that the trio is now called the Blacks. The 3 men are surprised, and Taisen asks if they're not happy with their new names. They immediately slam their heads into the ground, saying they'll agree with anything he says, expressing how much they love the name and that they are indeed the Blacks. Number 3 agrees with number 1's statement. Taisen walks away visibly pleased, and tells Soso that those are their names now and that she can use them however she likes. Soso calls out to Taisen, but he cuts her off by asking where Kunwen is, mentioning that he hasn't seen him around. Soso replies that Kunwen should be training at the moment. Taisen wonders aloud why Kunwen is always training, remarking that he's living its stupidly honest life. The scene shifts to the training hall, where the sound of Kunwen training fills the air. He reflects on the fight against the Crimson Dragon sect leader, thinking about how all Taisen did was lightly strike the leader's chin with his palm. Kunwen remarks that he's never seen that martial art before and tries to imitate it exactly the way Taisen did. He then contemplates his decision to join the Sword Dragon Corps, saying he's never regretted it. If the Golden Wall merchants ever run into a crisis, their motto is to help them as much as possible, and as long as he follows that motto, he will always be handsomely rewarded. Still, he admits to feeling anxious. However, during one training session he suddenly felt a shift. In the middle of his training he spotted something, a figure behind everyone else, none other than Taisen. He realized that Taisen would help him reach new heights. Kunwen then hears Taisen's voice asking how long he intends to train, which catches him off guard as he didn't expect Taisen to be there. Taisen informs him that they need to head to the courtesan house soon. Kunwen agrees but asks if he can ask Taisen a quick question. Taisen agrees to hear him out, and Kunwen asks if Taisen has decided whether he's going to keep hiding. Taisen asks what Kunwen means by hiding, and Kunwen explains that first it was the assassin, then the Crimson Dragon sect leader, and now the restriction technique. After seeing all of this, Kunwen is certain of something. Taisen begins to wonder if Kunwen has figured him out, and he realizes that he had thought of him as just a musclehead. He starts to question whether he may have let his guard down too much. He can't allow anyone to discover that he's the heavenly demon, and as he reflects on the situation, he acknowledges that he has started to like Kunwen little by little. But in the end, Taisen wonders if he has no choice but to kill him right then and there.